All right, we've reached 5 past. I think we'll make a start, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I'm Carol Moffat. I work for the Farmer Network as a coordinator. So Sarah Fleetwood is also on the call as a panelist, and we sort of all decided that we needed to have a little bit of a northern update and what it might mean for us. So we invited along Gordon Hicks from DEFRA, Rudolph Rochelle from APHA, Fernando Blanco Esparros, and Chris Dodds and Leon Oliver for our panel this evening. So the format is we're just going to go through a little bit of an update on Bluetongue from Rudolph and Fernando to start with, and then we'll go over to Gordon, hear a little bit from Chris, and Leanne is our sort of local vet expert as well. So just to sort of have a bit of a different turn on how we're sort of coping with it up here in the north of England. Just a big thank you to the National Lottery Community Fund who have funded this evening's call and Sarah and I's time to sort of set it all up. So without further ado, I'll hand over to APHA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for the opportunity. So we'll start with just a reminder of the Ruminant Health and Welfare website there. It's a go-to place, first place, and it's got links to all the essential government website as well. It's got the latest information on, there's just some screenshot of what's on there. They've even got a hotline there where you can speak to a person if you really get stuck. So useful to remember that. So a bit of a background on Bluetongue, notifiable viral disease spread by biting midges, disease of sheep, cattle and goats mainly, but camelids and deer can also be affected. Severity of disease vary between species, breed, and depending on the serotype involved. Important, not all infected ruminants will show signs of disease. And it does not affect people or food safety, so meat and milk from infected animals are safe to eat and drink. So there's quite a large number of recognized serotypes. It's close to 30 at the moment, found all over the world, apart from Antarctica. And there's several types circulating in Europe at the moment. There's BTV1, there's BTV3, there's 2 different strains, there's BTV4, and there's 2 strains of BTV8. Our previous outbreak was in 2007, and then in 2023 we had BTV3 emerged in the Netherlands. Still don't know where it came from, and then it came to us same year in Kent and Norfolk at the end of that year and the beginning of 2024, and that was all detected by surveillance testing. None showed clinical signs. And then the first clinical case was confirmed on the 26th of August in 2024. And as you all know, we had a number of further cases since then. Important with regard to vaccines, although available, they are strain specific. So if it doesn't list the strain on the bottle, then it's not going to work for that disease. So a bit about the life cycle. So if we start here with the infected adult sheep, that's why it's got a blue face for Bluetongue. And an adult female midge, uninfected, will bite it, get the virus. Then you get a development phase in the virus, which takes 4 to 20 days. It's temperature dependent. And then it can bite another susceptible sheep or cow and transfer the virus to that animal. And then it goes through a latency period, as we call it, develops viremia, and then it can become infective again to vectors after 2 to 4 days. So that's how the cycle goes. So we need the midges there, essential part. And because it's midges, it's temperature dependent and therefore season dependent as well. So we mentioned the biting midges, that's essential. We don't have direct animal to animal spread except for vertical. What do we mean by vertical? So it can pass from the dam to the fetus inside the uterus. And then we can get long distance spread through a wind-blown infected midges. As we've seen, we got that from across the channel from Europe. And that's how we got our infection here. But obviously movement of infected live animals can also transfer the virus to new areas. And then things like semen, ova, and embryos can potentially play a small part in transmission, but it's probably a very small part. Blood virus can be spread by contaminated needles and other contaminated surgical equipment. So important to remember when you vaccinate, especially if you vaccinate in an area where you know there's disease present. So we mentioned the seasonality, because we've got the midges, so it's strongly associated with the midge numbers, and they peak in late summer, early autumn. And you've got higher activity in May and then in September, and then also in dawn and dusk. As we say, the temperature affects the survivability and activity of the adults, but it can get fairly cold where the midges can still be active down to 4 degrees, but then the virus inside them won't replicate. But as we know, inside a shed or sometimes on the sunny side of a hedge, you can still get temperatures going up, and they can still spread the virus if they are infected. So we need really hard frost for a number of days to kill all the midges and to put a stop to the spread. And then we know the virus can survive from one season to another through overwintering. The exact mechanisms are not known. So we mentioned the incubation period 4 to 8 days, and then the lesions that we see is associated with the virus multiplication and damage that it caused to the lining of the blood vessels. So that results in bleeding. That area then doesn't get oxygen. Then you get inflammation, which forms swelling and reddening and fluid accumulation. And then these lesions are then more severe if these areas are subject to mechanical damage and abrasion. So things like the feet, the mouth, the eyes, and the teeth, that's where you see the most obvious clinical signs. So these are clinical signs that we've seen during this outbreak in England. So the first one is cattle. So from 24th of August to 18th of September, we had 76 animals with clinical signs on 20 premises. And those are the most common signs. So the animals appear lethargic, and lameness was another common one of cattle, and then red mucous membranes. Conjunctivitis, so that's inflammation or infection of the eyes, ulceration inside the mouth, crusting on the lips or nose, as we see in this picture here, and then nasal discharge. But there's quite a long list of other things that can be seen as well, maybe less commonly so. What is interesting is the lesions that we see around the eye, which seems to be new for this bluetongue strain. We haven't seen that with BTV8 or the other strains. So some of the corneal lesions can look like new forest eye or conjunctivitis. Milk drop obviously can be seen in dairy cattle as well. So that just shows the lesions that one see on the teeth, so the redness and slight scab formation. So you have to be close to really see that. And then on the nose, you get that redness and a slight nasal discharge and crust forming there. Same with the scabs and fissuring and redness and erosions. Maybe slight swelling, but the swelling is not that obvious in cattle. And most of the clinical signs in cattle are less severe than what we see in sheep. Again, the slight redness and erosions there inside the nostrils, inside the mouth, so you have to be quite close to see that. Same there on the hard palate, and you see the drooling there. So obviously, if you see that, then things like foot and mouth disease can look quite similar as well. So it needs to be reported. And then lower down on the foot, you can see the redness there. You see slight swelling, but once they've got that, the lameness is the one thing that you will notice. So in sheep, again, the same period, there was 92 animals on 37 premises that showed clinical signs. So the common one was nasal discharge, and then malaise or lethargy, hypersalivation, lameness, not eating, ulcers in the mouth, and then also an increased temperature or fever. But again, there's a list of other signs that can be seen. Swollen muzzle is commonly seen as well, and a swollen head. because those you can also see with liver fluke and hemonchus. Get the crusting around the nostrils, breathing difficulties. Sometimes they just go and lie down, they don't want to get up. You can get the coronary band lesions, bleeding of the lips. You can see abortions if it's the right time of the year, red membranes, ocular discharge, and sheep can die as well, especially if they show severe clinical signs. So some of the pictures there, these were some of the first cases. Recumbent, don't want to get up. They are not willing to or able to. There we see the drooling, hypersalivation. We see the nasal discharge and the crushness around there. Same there. And you can see that swollen face, swollen lips. On the inside, you get the redness, slight ulcerations, also there on the tongue. Again, you have to open the mouth to see that, but you may see the drooling or hypersalivation. Just a few more pictures of the nasal discharge and the swelling and the hypersalivation there. So these are pictures from the Netherlands, so more severe there, but you get that, as they described, that burnt muzzle face, the redness and the ulcerations, swelling. It's got a severely swollen face, quite severe coronitis. And interesting, they had cases like this where it looks like the affected sheep are standing drinking water, but if you look closely, they only have their muzzle in the water and they're not actually drinking. And they think it's two things. They put their mouth in there because it eases some of the burning sensation, the pain, having it in water. And secondly, some are so badly affected that they can no longer drink. So they're probably thirsty and they just stand there in desperation to try and get some liquid in their mouth. So differential diagnosis, a long list. I'm not going to go through details, but at first, numbers in blue are notifiable diseases, which can look similar. So if you see those lesions, then please report them. And then obviously ORF, we see that very often, that it can look like these lesions with the scabbiness. And then there's a list of other things as well. Obviously foot rot and dermatitis can give you the same signs. In cattle, again, you've got a number of notifiable diseases to consider. You've got common things like malignant catarrhal fever and mucosal disease, photosensitization. They can all look very similar, and then some of the viral diseases as well. So just a reminder, if you are affected, or if you've got the bad luck to be so unlucky, your veterinarian can still visit, can still treat affected animals. Some of them will probably need pain relief and treatment, and there are published guidance and papers on what treatment will be effective. So tools to protect our stock or your stock, limited housing. If you've got access to that, they talk about higher risk periods, dawn and dusk, to house them. Obviously, that's not always practical. To increase ventilation, the midges don't like wind, so if you have mechanical fans inside the sheds or the housing, but it has to be quite strong to be able to make an influence. If you want to create a midge-proof house or shed, that's quite difficult because the mesh has to be really, really fine. And the problem then is you've got no airflow through there, so you create welfare problems. Movement of animals, they talk about moving at lowest risk periods, so middle of the day and not dawn and dusk, again, if that's at all practical. The other thing is just an alert to try and think when you move cattle, or move animals, is it really necessary? And it's just to try and limit unintentional spread, because some animals, as we said, may be infected but show no clinical signs. Then the other thing is, if you have got access to a high exposed field, then the midges are going to be less likely there than maybe in a lower down field surrounded by trees. Vaccination, that's obviously the one thing that will make a difference and has been proven to do so, and a bit more about that later. Then on insecticides, there's no evidence that they really make a difference. They may kill the midge, but then transmission has already happened. And again, repellents don't seem to work either, because the effect just doesn't last long enough. But just a quick show the current situation in the Netherlands. So these tiny red and blue dots, as we can see, it's really up to the Northern Islands there, all along the coast here. So most of the country has been affected, and that was this year's figures. That's what Germany looks like. We can see that's a fairly widespread situation there as well, and high numbers, and right up to the north there. France, this sort of brown colored areas here is BTV3. Obviously, France has got a number of other strains as well, but that's the BTV3 ones we are showing here on this map. So then we come to the control zone. So I'll hand over to Fernando to talk about the next couple of slides.
Okay, thanks, Rudolph. We'll be basically covering the control zones, the current situation updates. We will be covering a little bit vaccination as well, ways of helping the farming community, considering the circumstances, and just general reminders. From the control zones, basically currently, if you can pass to the next slide, this has been extended. You have an interactive Bluetongue virus map, which has a link on the presentation where we can share. Otherwise, I can send all the links and the information to Carol later on. The current restriction zone is the one on the right-hand side, which has been extended slightly recently towards Nottinghamshire and parts of Northamptonshire and also Leicestershire towards the west. So that's the current restriction zone. We have no temporary control zones at the moment. So next slide. So going back to the latest situation, it has been confirmed so far in 129 premises, and that's the current situation. They were basically widespread all around Yorkshire, but mainly down in the southeast. There's also implied in the restrictions zone they have to establish movement controls of live ruminants and camelids, and also germplasm as well. Next slide. The measures for the movement within the Bluetongue, moving to slaughter is an option that you can have if you're within the restricted zone. You have to apply depending on where the movement is going to be. If it's outside the restriction zone, you should apply for a license. If it's within, you will not necessarily have to do it. Temporary control zones at the present, they are not really applicable because we don't have them. They all became restriction zones. All other movements, animals can move into or within the restricted zone as long as they don't have restrictions, meaning those premises we consider they have positives or being detected positives through surveillance. They will have a different type of restriction individual to the holding. So there's a little bit of exemption. The restrictions on the movements will be a bit tighter on those. Shows and gatherings are permitted within these zones, but animals cannot leave the zone. And it's prohibited to move any animal within a restricted zone or temporary zone if it shows clinical signs of Bluetongue on the day of the transport, meaning they should be notified to the authorities, like BHA, if that's the case. As the restrictions also apply to germinal products. If a keeper wishes to freeze germinal products in the restricted zone or temporary zone, they must obtain a specific license. I will give all those details on how you can obtain the licenses later on. I can give it to Carol as well. If you operate a germinal product collection center, you may apply to be designated as such. It is possible to move and use germinal products into and within the zone, meaning restriction zone. Measures for movements from inside to outside the zones. Moving to slaughter, the animals can be moved out to the restriction zone to a designated slaughterhouse outside the restriction zone, or the temporary control zone is applicable. In England and Wales, under the terms of a general license, the animal must go, the conditions are that should go immediately for slaughter to take place between 1 hour after sunrise and 2 hours before sunset. That will be part of the general license conditions, should be followed. They can move to markets within the restriction zone and temporary control zone. They can use this license for direct movement to a designated slaughterhouse from the markets for immediate slaughter as well. The general license does not apply if a premise is under specific Bluetongue restriction notice, which is what we describe when we consider as infected premises. They will have a specific restriction within the restriction zone, just to avoid confusion. Those are basically holdings in which positives were detected. If a premises is under Bluetongue restrictions notice and the owner wishes to move animals, they have to apply for a specific license for that specific movement. all other movements, for all of the other animal movements, including moves to live to premises outside the restriction zone, the owners must apply for a specific license as well. And at this time, animals cannot be moved to a market outside the zone, defined as restricted zone, and cannot move animals purchased at the market inside the zone to destinations outside that zone. But this is being kept under review. And germinal products, the germinal products from susceptible animals, that it will include all ruminants, not the domestic ones, but also deer and camelids, can be moved out of the zone subject to obtaining a specific license. And Germinal Product Collection Center receives a germinal product of animals from zones may apply to be designated as well. Next slide. The restrictions will apply not only to live animals, but also to germplasm, which includes semen. From bluetongue can be transmitted to recipient animals by infected semen, so there is no routine accredited test to detect infected semen. Therefore, to confirm the absence of the bluetongue, donor animals must be tested. That means that the bulls who are donated are the ones to be tested to make that sure that their semen will be clear. And if a collection center is in a bluetongue zone, it will need to be approved, designated, to freeze or receive germinal product from a TB susceptible animals. If a collection center is located outside the bluetongue zones, but receives germinal products from animals that are located within the zone, it will need to be designated as well. Designated and licenses impose testing of animals. That means that to be designated, you have to receive the germplasm, but the animals, the donor animals, have to be tested, and in principle, obviously cleared or negative. Movement of animals or germinal products onto or off any premises within the zone is not allowed, except under license. No person shall freeze or any germinal product located in the zone unless the germinal product is frozen on premises that is designated or a specific license is issued. For further information, you can go to that link. I will provide that as well in the updated ones. Next slide. We're going to cover slightly vaccination, but not too much into detail. Vaccination, well, there's permits for the use of 3 TB for the serotype, the bluetongue serotype 3 currently circulating vaccine products were issued on Wednesday, 4th of September. You can see that on Gov.uk webpage, and we'll provide that as well. The vaccines are called the BlueVac 3, the Silversul TB3, and the Bultavo 3. They are the ones that have been sort of authorized. They do not have a full marketing authorization yet, but they have been used widely in Europe and have been assessed as safe and effective at reducing viremia in cattle and sheep. They are under license only. Farmers and livestock keepers have to make applications, so you have to apply for a license to be able to vaccinate. The vaccine will be supplied by a wholesale and sold by private vets. The farmers will be allowed to administer the vaccine themselves, but there will be conditions on its use. The permitted vaccines, TB serotype 3 vaccines, the initial licenses for the use of the vaccines will be a general license, will allow geographically targeted use. That means that initially, you can apply for a general license if you're in a high-risk county as part of a phase approach. And basically, in practical terms, will be any premises that's within the restriction zone. A specific license could be available on application through APHA. That's anyone in England can apply, any holding. That will be a specific license. The general one is only for holdings that are within the restriction zone. There are no current plans to allow bluetongue serotype 3 vaccine used in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Veterinarians are required to report on use and adverse effects because it's still not completely fully authorized. So they will have to report to VMD any side effects that possibly can happen. Full details of guidance are available online. I will provide that as well, which you can distribute to the people that are attending the event today. A license supply and approved that takes up to 310 to 24. There's 15 general and 13 specific. That's at the moment how many have been applied. The general license for TB vaccine in England, let's give you the schedule of conditions. We can share those, so we'll not go into detail. Yeah. And then you can also have, there's a comparison website as well for the vaccine comparison, the guidelines for the 3 serotypes. You can just see the scrolls, and each one will have specific specifications depending on the phase of development they have from the manufacturer perspective. So it will be basically a choice in a conversation with your private vets, which one you choose, you decide for that route. And just to finish, just be aware and stay up to date, stay vigilant, notify APHA as soon as you suspect any disease. Monitor risk, sign up for disease alerts, be prepared for whatever disease might arrive, register all your land. There is also advice in the Gov UK for that registered temporary land as well. Just make sure that you source the stock and move responsibly, as my colleague Rudolf mentioned before. And the situation is changing constantly, so it's important also to keep looking at the rolling information Gov UK, the latest situation and the number of cases. And you will have some links there, which I will provide as well. Now I'm basically going to talk a little bit of the impact elsewhere, in particular in the Netherlands, which have considerably a big number of cases effectively spreading throughout the country. So obviously, as expected, the farmers in the Netherlands are very seriously impacted by dealing with the bluetongue disease. Obviously, the animals are quite ill. They have significant mortality there, in particular in sheep, and loss of production. This has had an impact, as we understand, in mental health and stock keepers, anxiety prior to visiting the animals in the morning. There was also great need to share experience of feeling powerless, to help their animals. Important for farmers is to speak to others in the same situation, or to seek help for farming support groups like the FCN. Equally, the same could be said about vets, because they also are basically under pressure of the field, and I can feel that maybe almost every day. Some animals seemingly got better, but they can develop secondary problems. They can have prolonged arthritis, basically degloving, kidney failure, and other possibly problems with thriving and production as well. So these sort of issues could be ongoing for months. The next slide. Then basically, DEFRA has launched a survey, basically to assist and try to help and understand what's happening in the farming community, and try to develop mechanisms basically to help in the current situation. So just to plead, if you can basically try to go to the link and complete the survey. So you can press next slide. And if you suspect the bluetongue disease, notify PHA by calling England, the Rural Services Helpline on that number. And just acknowledgement, comments, questions. And that's a question session now.
Have we any questions? You can type them into the chat or the Q&A tab on the bottom of the screen there. Anybody? No. Very, very well done, the both of you. A nice summary of it. I don't know how we're going to digest it all.
No, Carol, take your time, and I will be in contact, and I will share some of the links and the information that we have, and they are welcome to ask any questions they have.
Brilliant.
Keep them updated.
Oh, thank you so much. That's great.
So, Carol, perhaps while we're waiting for a few people to add some questions in there, because this is about the audience asking us questions rather than us telling you what you think you want us to hear. Just a little bit. So I'm Gordon Hickman. I'm from DEFRA. I'm head of the exotic disease control team. So we're the policy side. Fernando and Rudolf are the operational delivery side. They're the experts. They're the vets that we listen to. Just a little bit of context, I think. So this is, we obviously had disease in 2023-24 down in Kent and in Norfolk, and that was a very different situation. It was much later in the year, and our policy then was to really stamp down on it and to stop overwintering. And so we had very much tighter controls then in those temporary control zones. I think we were successful, but it was very clear that the impact of the restrictions was far greater on farmers than the impact of the disease itself. So in that case, we had 126 cases or infected animals, but none of them showed any clinical disease. So working with Chris and the NFU and NSA and NBA, etc., we looked at what we would do this year, because we knew we were going to get it. You know, and as Rudolf has explained, you know, we've got a lot of disease in continental Europe, and the evidence was that it was going to blow across on a midge, on a plume at some stage during the year, and unfortunately it did on Bank Holiday Monday, and then it all kicked off. So our policy from a DEFRA perspective is to look to contain disease and to slow the spread. And so that's why you've seen the zones gradually get bigger. And as we've got evidence that disease is circulating in those zones, we've extended them. And now we have these restricted zones that Fernando showed you on the map. And they've gradually extended as they've come north and further west. And all of our efforts are on, if you like, those borders, the boundaries. So we're doing surveillance on those boundaries to check that the zone is in the right place. And as soon as we find that we've got evidence of infection, we'll then shift the zone out a little bit more to try and contain that disease. I'm sure you know, because you talk to farming colleagues, etc., but there are currently 8 cases, so 8 places where we found an infected animal that are not inside that restricted zone. And there's a couple in Wales, there's one in Cornwall, there's one in Cumbria, there's one in Cheshire, one in Shropshire, one in Somerset, and one in North Yorkshire. And you might say, well, why haven't we put in place a zone around them? And that's because we identified those cases through what we call high-risk moves. So these were movements of what we now know to be infected animals from the eastern counties, mainly Suffolk and Essex and Kent, but they were moved before the zones were put in place, and some of them were moved before we'd even confirmed that first case. And so that infected animal had moved to those different counties, and we were comfortable that, you know, it hadn't been acquired locally. So that's why we haven't put in place zones around those, but we have culled those infected animals. And if anyone asks, yes, we paid compensation for any animals that we've compulsory culled to control disease. And then all the other animals on that premises we're testing just to check that there hasn't been that local transmission. Now, if we find there's evidence of local transmission on any of those sites, well, then we'll put in place those zones, and we'll start the process again, as you will have monitored from looking at gov.uk. And you may hear that, you know, there's testing down the road, and that may well be because there's been one of those high-risk moves to a neighbouring farmer or whatever. And if we find an infected animal, then we'll cull that animal. And I suppose just the only other thing, I think Fernando said that moves to a market outside of the zone are not allowed. I mean, that's true for a green market, but literally last week, well, in fact, Monday of this week, our first red market took place. So we're now approving red markets, and these will take animals out of the restricted zone, but it has to be to an approved red market. We're not allowing yet movements to green markets or breeding sales, etc. We are looking at that, but we don't yet currently have the infrastructure in place. So just a little bit of extra sort of context around what Fernando and Rudolf said, and hopefully you've all thought of a whole load of questions by now.
Yeah, we've got a few. Thanks everybody who's asked the question. Right, shall we start at the top? So Rachel Rogers asks, will a map be provided of where the individual cases are rather than just by county, so we can see how close the disease is to us?
We are actively considering that, but it is a balance, because what we don't want, this is through no fault of people. This is midge borne. This is not like, a lapse of biosecurity, etc. And we know that for a number of farmers, particularly in those areas outside of the restricted zone, they've had quite significant sort of negative reaction through social media, etc. So there's a balance. We are going to discuss it with the core group, because you will see that the Netherlands, Rudolf's put a map up there showing those cases. If we do, it won't show at the level of detail that you can identify an individual premises, but there is that balance. So I think probably in the next week or so, we will put that map up. But what I can assure you is that the vast majority of those cases are on the close to the coastal fringes, all the way around the south.
Thanks, Gordon. Another one here. Do you think it's a matter of time before the UK is in a nationwide restriction?
No, I don't think it is a matter of time. The good thing is, we're now into the autumn. And if you think back to what Rudolf was talking about, that cycle. So you've got an infected animal. Firstly, it's got to be bitten by a midge, but the temperature then needs to be warm enough for that, what we call the extrinsic incubation period, to take place within that midge before it then becomes infectious and can then do local transmission. And the colder it gets, the longer that period takes. And what we want to get to the place is that period takes longer than the life of the midge. So the midge dies, and so you don't get that transmission. So I'm not saying that we won't get there this year, because we also follow the evidence, but so far we do look as though we've managed to contain it in those eastern counties. And I think if you think of Great Britain and where the livestock dense areas are, they're all over the west of the county. And so what we're trying to do is to keep it out of the west of the county for as long as we can. Now, if we'd got disease earlier in the year, then almost certainly it probably would have got to the point where we had much, much bigger zones, potentially for the whole of England or the whole of GB. But we're not there yet. We may be lucky, we may not be lucky. But so far, we're hopeful to contain it. And whilst we haven't seen the sort of clinical signs that have been seen in the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany, we have had some pretty nasty cases of disease. Animals have had to be euthanized. There have been some mortality, but it's lower than we've seen in continental Europe. But if it had got there earlier, or it gets into these livestock dense areas, we just don't know.
Thank you, Gordon. Just another one. What's the uptake of the vaccine so far in the UK, guys?
I mentioned licenses issued. That was on the 3rd of October, so we were a few days beyond that. It was 15 general, 13 specific. I don't have got the numbers involved of the actual vaccine doses that's related to that, or the number of animals. I don't know if you know that, Gordon or Fernando.
So we're monitoring it. As things currently stand, we think there's about just over 35, we think, premises that are actually vaccinated, and they range in size, from a couple of I guess hobby farmers or glorified pets, to one premises over 500 cattle, another over 500 sheep. So reasonable size holdings. And they're split about 50-50 in the high-risk counties where you can use a general license, and those outside of the county. I think it is a commercial decision and an animal health decision to discuss with your private vet as to whether it's right for you now, or whether it's right for you to wait till next year, going forward. So I think it's probably more take up than we were expecting, to be honest. So we're monitoring, and at the moment there's enough supply to meet demand, and that's why we've got this sort of 2-tier system, because we wanted to make sure that everyone in those at most risk in the east, had first dibs at any vaccine that was available. We're monitoring that, and if it looks like demand is not outstripping supply, then we'll extend the general license to make it easier. Because whilst it's relatively easy to apply for a specific license, it is a bit more of a faff than just talking to your vet and working things out locally.
Very good, thank you. Where are we? Is it correct that we no longer need to cull infected livestock? We're hearing different reports.
So, right, how do I explain this? So now in the restricted zone, so where we know we've got circulating virus, so that's that sort of pinky salmony colour that Fernando showed you, we're not culling any animals in that zone. But where we are culling is where we don't have evidence of circulating virus. So if we pick up a case in the free area, wherever that might be, we will cull that animal until we establish that there is circulating disease, local transmission. So those 8 cases that I spoke about, in Wales, Cornwall, Cumbria, etc., we culled the positive animals there, and then we're testing the rest of the animals. In temporary control zones, and those of you that remember looking at the map, those are the green ones. Generally speaking, they're circles. Again, we only put in place a temporary control zone until we have the evidence that virus is circulating. So we will continue to cull in temporary control zones until we get evidence that we've got circulating virus. And that's usually where we've got a positive PCR. So we've got live virus, but no evidence of seroconversion, so no antibodies. So it's new, fresh infection. And generally speaking, we can compare that with the others where you've got seroconversion and it's older infection. So it's obvious then that you're, if you like, in the second cycle. So a midge has bitten one of those infected animals, it's gone through that process and has bitten another animal, and so you're in the second phase of the outbreak. And at that point, there's no point continuing to cull those animals because we know it's in the midge population and there are billions of them. So that's when we stop culling. Hope that explains. So you might still hear that we're culling some animals, but not in those restricted zones.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gordon. That's cleared things up. Yeah, next one is from Richard Pullman. We've got, if your farm ends up in a restricted zone, how does this affect you in terms of having the public on your farms, e.g. footpaths, school visits, camping, that kind of thing?
So it doesn't affect it at all. So humans don't spread. It's not like foot and mouth disease. So yeah, you can allow people on. Obviously, the only thing you need to think about is, if you've got sick animals, and what that might look like to the general public wandering by. But from a disease control perspective, not an issue.
Thank you. How long do you expect the zones to be in place? This is from Fiona Robinson.
If only I knew. I mean, we have to be guided by the evidence. So the first thing we'll be looking for is when the temperatures are low enough that we're comfortable that we don't get that risk of onward transmission. So that temperature that Rudolph was talking about. The next critical thing we need to look at is what we call the seasonally vector low period. So that's when midges are no longer active and no longer basically taking a blood meal. And that really just does depend on the weather. So last year it was particularly late. So it was, I think it was I forget what it was. It was either 8th of January, I think. Okay. Whereas most years it happens sometime between November and December. I think the earliest it's ever been is the 14th of November, and the latest was last year. So if it's a warm winter, the restrictions will stay in place longer because it means that midges are still active. And the problem we have is that once a midge is infected, it stays infectious for life. So it can, take another blood meal and infect another animal. So what we want to do is get to the place where midges are no longer flying, no longer biting anything. And that's when the risk changes and reduces. And then we need to work through how best to manage the risk of overwintering. Because what we don't want to do is put in place all these measures, control disease this year, only to say, oh well, we've let it all go, and then we get overwintering and it kicks off much earlier next year. And I think if you remember what Rudolph was talking about in terms of how the disease transmits, so yes, you've got the disease is transmitted by biting midges, but that vertical transmission, that maternal transmission. So if you move a cow or a ewe and it's in lamb or in calf, and you move it to outside of the zone, that calf or lamb can be born infected, and so that's a mechanism for overwintering, depending on when that calf is born. So if it then is born in next spring, for example, it could itself become a new source of infection wherever it ends up. So we need to think about how to manage that risk. And the other risk is from entire males. So a female or a non-pregnant animal is probably only infectious for 30 odd days or so in terms of a midge biting it and becoming infected. The WOA, the World Organization for Animal Health, say a precautionary period is 60 days, but that's it circulating in the blood. There is a concern that a ram or a bull or its semen, if you've had a collection from that, can infect an animal for much longer than that. So whilst it's PCR positive, so we can detect virus, there is a risk that it can infect the female, and so that's another risk. And if you look back to what we did last winter, we kept restrictions on entire males that were known to be positive and on pregnant females for much longer than we did for everything else, which we allowed to move relatively freely. So that's a very long answer to say that I don't actually know when we'll be able to free up restrictions, because it really will depend on the weather conditions. It will also depend on how far the disease has got. So, if we've managed to keep it pretty much where it is, we might look to try and keep it there longer and perhaps have some controls out of those zones. But if we've already sort of moved the zone much further west, then it's a different situation. So I suppose watch this space really, and we'll keep communicating with you. We'll work with our core group to work out the most proportionate way of managing the risk.
Thank you. Another question here: is there any risk of infected midges being carried on vehicles and the infection being transmitted into new areas?
So there does remain a small risk of that. So our general licenses that allow movement of animals out of the zone to go to designated abattoirs, we do require the inside of those vehicles to be treated with an insecticide, allowed to dry, obviously, because what we don't want to do is to create a problem with withdrawal periods or whatever, because these animals are going to slaughter. So we're managing the risk there. For those animals that we allow to move out of the zone to live, so again, as Fernando said, we require a pre-movement test to check that they're negative or as negative as we can be, and then a post-movement test. And again, those animals, we require the the vehicle to be insecticide treated. We don't require the animals to be insecticide treated because that's a waste of time. So that minimises the risk. But it's also true that midges can hitchhike in other sorts of vehicles. They can move, with pigs or whatever. So we can't prevent every movement in a vehicle, but the bits that we can control, we are controlling through our licensing. And of course, midges fly themselves. So, over a period of time, they will gradually move westward. So that's why the long-term solution, probably is vaccination, because, we'll probably get another incursion next year from continental Europe, because there's bound to be new cases there. And we may not be able to stop all overwintering here. So, we probably will get incursions again next year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, is that okay? Is the infection spreading and behaving in the same manner as previous infections elsewhere?
I suppose it depends where you say elsewhere. It hasn't spread as quickly as it has in continental Europe, but I think it has had a similar spread to Bluetongue 8, which is a different serotype that we got in 2007, 2008. That was a very similar pattern of spread. This does appear to be a, Rudolph will tell me off for using the wrong word here, but it does seem to be a more aggressive or virulent virus than the Bluetongue 8 virus, particularly in continental Europe. I think we've been surprised how the clinical signs haven't been as severe as perhaps we were expecting. We're not being complacent, but that's why we're looking to contain it. But yes, it's spreading as we expect. We did expect it to arrive in the eastern counties. All of the plume modelling of the wind-borne incursions, match that, and you then get that slow movement. The long distance movements tend to be in infected animals that then create a new focus of infection. And so far, so good. We seem to have caught them, but what we don't know, we don't know. And tomorrow we could get a case that's in free area. We just don't know yet. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Rudolph, in terms of your thoughts. The modelling is predicted what we're seeing, I think, is what I'd say.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything specific to add. Apart from that, it has managed to spread to quite a number of European countries and quite far north as well.
Yeah, which in itself is a problem to the farming community, because your source of TB-free cattle has pretty much dried up, because there are very, very few Northern European countries now that you can import replacement dairy cattle from, because trade has pretty much stopped from all of those areas.
Yeah, thank you. Another question here. Do you have the more recent results from the UK survey?
So I don't. In fact, I think it was only launched last Friday or the week before Friday. So I've not seen anything since. I think we're going to get an update later this week. But I would urge anyone that, certainly, I guess most of you are outside of the zone, but please fill in that survey. We're probably going to do something ourselves for the known infected premises, and just to follow some of them up. But this is really just trying to get that snapshot of the impact of the disease, both on those where we've got confirmed cases, but also those that are in zones. But also, just if you're not in a zone, you still may be affected by it, because maybe your supplier is now in a zone and you can't buy from who you normally do. Maybe you normally sell to one of these people and you're thinking, well, I've got sheep that maybe normally go on tack or something. What are the long-term thoughts of that? So please put all, we want to know all of the impacts that it's having on you, because uncertainty is the worst possible thing in terms of the impact on businesses and mental health and well-being, etc. So the more that we know, the more the impacts that we understand, the better we can make policy.
Yeah, we've got the link, haven't we? We can send that round to the group, can't we?
Yeah,
that's great.
No, and it is totally confidential, so your details won't be shared with anyone. I don't want to know. I don't need to know. So
yeah, thank you. A message from Donna, one of our colleagues at the Farmer Network. Were the isolated cases you mentioned earlier identified because they showed symptoms, or were they movements traced from farms where bluetongue was confirmed?
So they were all what we call high risk moves. So we basically trace them. They're technically not tracings. Tracings normally are where you've got a positive confirmed case. A couple of them did have some clinical signs when they were inspected, but actually they were other things, so or some of the other differentials that Rudolph was explaining. So none of them were what we call report cases. So none of them were showing clinical signs. And we have had very good reporting of suspicion of diseases outside of the zones. We investigate them all, and so far they've all been negative. The next one may not be.
Yeah.
Gordon, it's quite important, isn't it, to stress the point that none of the cases have been as a result of illegal moves or moves that they've happened. There were moves that happened before the farms were under any restriction.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tried to explain that, but yes, there's no suggestion that people acted illegally or anything else like that.
I think the wording high risk, it doesn't mean the farmer was doing something risky. No. It's just how we evaluate it on epidemiological terms, and we call it as something where we need to look at, because potentially that could have come from an area where there was infection unbeknown to whoever moved them.
And we called them high risk because all the available evidence so far is that the most likely date of incursion was the 11th of August. Obviously, we detected it on the 26th of August, so it had already been in the country for a while. And we've gone back to the 28th of July, which was the next earliest date that there was an event where potentially infected midges had blown over. So we've basically taken that period between the 28th of July and the date that the respective zone was put in force, and we've followed up those animals, and we've started the longest distance moves, so into Wales and Scotland and Cornwall, etc., and we're gradually working our way back closer to the zone, just to make sure that we've eliminated any of those chances of an infected animal causing a local transmission event, for want of a better word.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Question from Christine: how will we be informed if and when we are placed in a restricted zone? What happens with open common land, and when would we vaccinate? Thanks, Christine.
So in terms of being notified, So provided we've got your mobile phone number or email address, you'll get a text alert or an email message from APHA colleagues that you're in the zone. If you sign up to the disease alerts, then you'll also get an alert to say that we've extended the zone, for example. So we will physically tell you if you're in the zone. Obviously, Fernando mentioned that interactive map. It really is very good, even though I say it myself. You can type your postcode in or a grid reference, and you can zoom right in to see if you're in the zone or not. And just to remember that if any part of your holding is in the zone, then all of you are considered to be in the zone. In terms of common land, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but on the point of vaccination, you know, we're not saying you must vaccinate. We're not saying that vaccinate you. What we're saying is we've made these vaccines available to you to have a discussion with your private vet. In a lot of cases, it may not be cost effective. It may not be right for you. But in certain circumstances, it absolutely will be right for you, and so that's why I think you need to discuss that with your private vet. Fernando's shown you all those comparisons and things that hopefully is some information for the private vet to help that discussion with you. And obviously, if you've got animals on common land, it's going to be a problem rounding them up for vaccination anyway. So you might want to think about, even if you decide to vaccinate, you might want to decide actually to do it, later on or in the spring, in preparation for next year, when you've got the animals in, because it may just be not practical to vaccinate them, while they're out.
Yeah. Is there random testing taking place?
Yes and no. Yes, it's random, but it's not random in another sort of sense. So if you look at that restricted zone that Fernando showed you, so all along the border between the RZ and the free area, we are doing surveillance. And so we are randomly selecting cattle farms. Yeah. Thanks, Rudolph. Along that strip. So we're picking cattle farms, firstly because they're probably easier to sample, but also midges appear to like biting cattle, and so they're a really good proxy for where the disease is, and also because they tend not to show clinical signs. We're much more likely to detect undetected disease, if you see what I mean. So the selection of the farms is random, and we sample 35 animals from each herd. And I think we take about 60 farms in a strip. So yes, we are doing random testing. But it's not just sort of random around the country. It's just on that border zone to check that we've got the boundary in the right place.
It's Gordon just intervened. 74 in each strip.
74. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. In farms that have the disease confirmed, what is the approximate percentage of animals that are affected?
That's a really good question. And the straight answer is we don't know, because we're only testing up to 20 animals. I don't think we've stopped testing any animal that is showing clinical signs. I think the biggest number I can remember was 14 animals on a premises. It's very often it's only one or two, but because we're not testing every single animal on the farm, the actual within herd prevalence is difficult to know. And so part of the follow-up that we're going to do is to be asking questions of the keepers to see, the level of clinical disease that they've experienced in the days and weeks after that first infection. So I suppose we don't think it'll be very high. It could be small percentages. I think in the Netherlands it's been up to 60% of animals, but that's at the top end. I don't know if you've got any more information, Rudolph. I don't think we have.
This is a good question. What sort of temperatures do we need before we can start to think we are safe from further bluetongue transmission for this year? And what time of year does this normally happen? I think we touched on this a little bit before, didn't we?
Yeah, so you've got those two things. So the seasonally vector low period, and that's when they basically stop biting, and typically that's more like 5 degrees C. But a combination of hard frosts will help, even if it's one-off hard frosts. And as I say, the earliest it's ever been is the 14th of November. Last year it was the 8th of January. The temperature that Rudolph mentioned on that cycle, it's around about 12 degrees average temperatures. So we're getting towards that sort of figure now, but there is some evidence that it can, I don't know what the right word is, that sort of incubation, that cycle can go into stasis, so it can sort of pause, and so if it then gets warm again, it can start up again. So it's really difficult to say how low it has to be for how many days, but it's now getting to the point where it's more like a month rather than 4 days. So the quickest it can happen is about 4 days, and that's really in the height of summer. And that's why if we got it earlier in the year, and why we think it really exploded in continental Europe, because they got it early, the temperatures were really high. Each cycle was a week or 2 weeks, and you just get that exponential explosion. So you get more and more midges getting infected, and those midges spreading out and moving, and that's why you get that explosion. So I think back end of October, into November, the risk gets much lower. But pray for frost and cold weather and miserable conditions.
Exactly. Next question. What do we know about whether it is likely to overwinter in the UK?
I wish I knew. I mean, what we know is the ways it can overwinter. So these midges can survive in dung heaps and nice warm conditions over winter, and perversely they can actually survive in quite cold conditions in that sort of cool period. So the earlier the start of the seasonally vector low period, and the later it warms up in the spring, the less risk that you get an infected midge that stays alive over winter, because these things generally don't have a very long life. But it is possible for that to happen. The real worry I think we have is in infected calves or lambs or other species, and in semen, whether it's frozen or service. So if you get an animal infected around now, it could still be infected as a bull 5 months later. So that's a risk. That's why we're only allowing people to freeze semen under license, that license means you test it before you take the donation, if you like, the collection, and afterwards, so that we're sure that semen is safe because it's tested free before and after, and then we're comfortable that it can be used whenever. But there is evidence that Bluetongue 8, for example, was reintroduced into France in frozen semen, because it was a very different strain that they'd had several times previously. So that is a risk, from frozen semen. So those are the generally thought to be the routes of overwintering. But of course, it can blow over again next year if you've got disease there, and of course we could import it in an infected animal if we drop our guard in terms of imports. So as you know, that we have a policy of post-import testing from any areas close to Bluetongue cases, and we have detected a couple of cases over recent years, one fairly recently down in Devon, I think it was, and again those cases were culled. So we travel in hope, but there is always that risk, and the more virus we've got circulating, the more infected animals we've got, the bigger the risk that we will have some form of overwintering event.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Thanks. With regards to clinical symptoms, are you seeing swelling of coronary bands on the feet, or just one foot, etc.?
Generally, they would be all four, but you can get one being more severe than the other if there's, damage to that particular limb.
Thank you. Could an infected ram pass on the virus to a ewe he has serviced? I think we've sort of touched on that one.
So yes, that is possible. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, we do occasionally get asked, Carol, can I get my ram tested? I want to be reassured. Maybe I bought a ram, from the area before any zones were in place. Yes, there is a commercial test available from the Pirbright Institute, and as long as there is no suspicion of clinical disease in your animal or flock, because obviously you need to report that is the case, you can pay for your own private test for that extra reassurance. So that is possible.
Yeah, great. Are infected livestock recovering, or is there the mortality in most cases?
No, I wouldn't say mortality in most cases. So far, most were mild and recover. But I think what came out of the survey so far, certainly with sheep, when they show severe clinical signs, they seem to be possible that they will end up dying. And it also seems that, I mean, it's only just started, but it seems that adult males or tups, many of them show severe clinical signs. So where you go to cattle, especially beef cattle, or suckler cows, there's very little clinical signs there, and hardly noticeable.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Can the vaccine be used in dairy cows, and does it have a milk withdrawal? And also, just sort of while we're on the vaccine, we were just wondering about how it affects fertility, because I think in the 2007 outbreak, it had a little bit of an effect, didn't it?
So as a non-vet, I don't think I should comment.
I'll take that one if you want, guys. So I'm a vet in practice. We're in Northumberland, so we haven't had any experience of using any of the vaccines. But on the website, the Ruminant Health and Welfare website, it does do a lovely comparison of all three vaccines. So the answer is there is no withdrawal on any of the three vaccines. Two of the vaccines say that it's safe to be used in pregnancy. one of the vaccines says that safety is not established in lactation. So I think, like you guys said, there isn't a full market authorization for these vaccines yet. They've not been used widely in the UK. There'll be more data become available as time goes on. But by the looks of it, there is a vaccine for every scenario that can be used, whether it's dairy, beef or sheep.
Okay.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks, Leanne. That's great. Ooh, do you know the percentage of animals that contract the virus that die or are euthanized, and the percentage of animals that could recover?
I don't think we have that data or information yet, Carol. We're building the evidence, and that's why we're really encouraging people to fill in that survey, get us that more information, and it's that information over time, because APHA, we'll do that initial investigation, we'll confirm disease, we'll place those animals under restriction, but we're not going back daily, weekly, because this can take place over weeks as that spreads. So we just don't have that information yet. We want to get it because that will help inform our policies for next year, and how seriously, I mean, we take it very seriously, but we need to weigh up the impact of the disease as a disease in terms of mortality, morbidity, production losses, against the impact of the disease and the impact of restrictions, restricting sale, etc. And I think it's also worth saying that we won't really know the full extent of this until next year, because we don't know whether there's going to be abortions, we don't know whether there's going to be an impact on sort of lambing rates or calving index or anything. So there could be a whole load of knock-on consequences depending on when those animals got infected, that we probably won't know for almost another 12 months. So we're sort of that's why we're trying to contain it until we better understand this disease, because we didn't just want to let it, in inverted commas, let it rip, get into the high dense areas and then find that we have a problem downstream.
Thing to keep in mind as well is other concurrent endemic diseases, because obviously we know we've got a number of them. So if, for example, you've got Haemonchus and then they get bluetongue on top of that, then potentially the mortality of those animals can be much higher. And then it's sometimes difficult to know, is it due to the bluetongue, or is it the combination of the two, or what exactly happened? Because they had that situation in the Netherlands this year where they had a lot of Haemonchus concurrent with the bluetongue, which made it look much more severe.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, thank you. What is the risk of bringing in new stock at the moment? We have a very small herd and don't want to risk any transmission from them. Solid.
I guess it depends where you are. So, the safest thing to do is to get them tested. If to come onto your farm. I think that's probably all I can say, really. Just talk to whoever you're buying them from. Clearly there is a higher risk if you're in the east of the county of the country, but that's probably the safest way.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it didn't say import, but obviously import from certain countries we know have got the disease as well, and maybe other strains as well. But they wouldn't be able to do that in any case. That would be illegal. So.
Okay, thank you. If an animal is infected and survives, are they then immune? This is a good one. Yeah,
that's how we understand it. Yeah, and a good immunity as well.
Yeah,
brilliant.
And probably better than vaccination as well.
Yeah, thank you. How long after an animal being lame would we start to see more symptoms? Obviously, we can't tell the vet with suspicion of BTV if they are just lame?
Amy, yeah, that's a good question. I would think, some of the common lesions that we mentioned, the malaise, lethargy, and the nasal discharge and nasal crusting, you would probably see that very much at the same time or within a few days of the lameness, I would think. But there's always going to be the exception to that rule, especially if you've got one animal. But I guess I get, it is a problem because, lameness is a common occurrence on any livestock farm at any given time. So you can't just, call out on any, just if it's just lame and there's no other clinical signs whatsoever. And especially if it's just a single animal, so I think you will want to see some other clinical signs as well. But obviously, if in doubt, get your vet out to have a look.
Yeah, thank you.
Carol.
Yeah.
Anne here again. I don't know whether we could just maybe put it in the context of, what we're doing at the coal face, as it were. So, with our clients, we have asked them to ring in if they've got any concerns. And that's just not a lamb with a bit of foot rot. That's, if it's a lesion of digital dermatitis or something that's just unexpected, got a high temperature, or particularly abortions, we should be notified of bovine abortions anyway, but that can be a symptom of Bluetongue. And we've had quite a lot of phone calls, and I don't think people should be scared of giving their vet a ring, or if they haven't got a really strong relationship with their vet and they wanted to ring APHA directly on that 03000 number, then that's fine. And I think all the inquiries we have had, and some of them we have passed to APHA and we've actually put them through as report cases, they've been treated really respectfully and very well. And I think certainly in Northumberland, and it'll be Cumbria area as well, we have this nightmare of foot and mouth where, as soon as you ring up and that phone call's made, the farm's shut up, there's tape across the gateway, your kids can't come home from school. It's nothing like that. This isn't an infectious disease. It's not a contagious disease. The vet is allowed to go on the farm, have a look, then can leave the farm on many occasions until the APHA vet arrives. The APHA vet will ask a load of questions. The herd will go on restrictions until it can be proved to be negative, which is just a couple of days. If all's being well, they take a couple of bloods, they have a bit of a chatter, have a cup of tea and leave the farm. It's not a massive deal. So I think we have to put that in perspective that, this is very different to what we've known in the past, and it's being well managed. And having been down and worked in Bury St Edmunds and Hull for the two kind of FOBs as we got in there, like APHA are right on top of this. They've got all the data at their fingertips and they're dealing with it really well. So I think that should be reassuring for all of us that maybe don't operate in those circles.
Yeah, I think it's just the whole notifiable word, isn't it, that sort of brings shudders down our spines, doesn't it, as farmers? But yeah, thanks for that.
Adding to Leanne, that restrictions will only apply to the live animals and germplasm on the holding, nothing else. So anything else can move freely. Wouldn't affect other livestock either, other than the ruminants.
Okay. Thank you. Can animals be carriers without showing clinical signs, symptoms?
Yeah, so we probably wouldn't strictly call them carriers because it is for a limited time period. Gordon said about 30 days and maximum maybe 60 days. So you don't get this persistent infection that you can get with other viruses. Apart from the exception is then intact males where the virus can become localized in the testicle, or where in a pregnant female it can pass on to the fetus.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Just had a text message through from another farmer. So this farmer's outside the zone, but they overwinter inside the zone with their hogs or sheep. So what should they do?
It's a really difficult thing for me to advise. I think you just have to talk it through, because clearly you can move them in, but there is a risk that you won't get them out again. You can test them out, but there will be that additional burden of having to have them pre and post movement tested to get them back out again. Obviously, if they're going into to be finished, then they can, even if the zones stay in place for much longer, they can go direct to slaughter. So that's not a problem. So you just need to think that through, I think. There is a license to allow movements to live out of the zone, but again, subject to that pre and post movement testing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another one here. Does a blood test reveal if an animal has been previously exposed to the disease and is therefore hopefully immune?
I think it
It's like
depends
an
on what
antigen
test,
thing.
depends what test you're doing, of course. It's probably best for Rudolph to comment, but we generally test for PCR, which is looking for the virus, and then if we've got a positive result, we look to see whether there are any antibodies there. So that's the ELISA test. We generally don't use the ELISA test as our main test because firstly, they could have been vaccinated against Bluetongue 8, for example, or increasingly Bluetongue 3, and we can't tell the difference between a vaccine strain and a naturally acquired strain, except in those few days after vaccination. So you could have a PCR negative and seropositive animal. So that is a sort of a diva, but it could have been vaccinated against Bluetongue 8, or it could have been imported, for example. So difficult to tell. We're most worried about live virus from a DEFRA perspective. I don't know if there's anything vet colleagues want to add to that.
No, okay.
No, okay.
Thank you, Gordon. That's great. What sorts of medications, products are being used to successfully treat Bluetongue virus?
That's a good question. I think there's a number that's been proven to be beneficial to reduce some of the severity of the pain, but I don't think there's anything that's going to treat Bluetongue as such. So I don't know if Leanne has probably got more up to speed of what drugs can be used, but I know the information has been published and is out there based on what they found works in the Netherlands and what didn't work.
Yeah, I think we've got to remember that it's a virus that we're dealing with. So we're not killing that virus as treating those animals. We're just symptomatic treatment and supportive care. So things like anti-inflammatories and encourage the animal to eat and drink, keeping the animal sheltered, minimizing stress, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's probably like thinking when you've got severe flu, you're not going to stop that happening, but it's nursing and just anti-inflammatories, like Leanne mentioned.
Yeah. Very good. Have we any more questions from you attendees that we can't see? No. If you think of anything, get back in touch with us at the Farmer Network, and I'm sure we'll be able to answer them with the help of Fernando, Rudolph, Gordon, Chris, Leanne, etc. So, Chris, have you anything to add about movement restrictions, just quickly, or have we sort of covered it? What do you think?
No, I think they're largely covered, to be honest with you, Carol. I think the important thing is that we have, through discussions with DEFRA and APHA, established a protocol for red markets. So they will be dedicated slaughter markets for animals that can go to that market from both the free area and the RZ. But there's one destination, and that's to kill. And we keep talking about whether that's a feasible, or whether there could be feasible answers for breeding stock. That is obviously an awful lot more complicated because there is a requirement, whatever happens, if you're moving out of the RZ, for both a pre and a post movement test. So we keep discussing that. but you know, I guess most of the auctioneers either in the zone or on the edge of the zone certainly know all the rules about what can move and can't move. But for me, the golden rule is you can move it within the RZ quite freely without restrictions. You can move into the RZ without restrictions, but when they're in the RZ, they become RZ animals. And moving out is more complicated in the need for pre and post movement testing, unless it is a red slaughter market.
Yeah.
Could I just ask a question, Carol, to Rudolph and the other veterinary experts? We're obviously hitting vaccination season at the minute, and there's a lot of vaccines going into sheep for abortion, well, when we can get it, and cattle for pneumonia. And I was just the importance of stereomatic needles or using a clean needle for every animal. Could we just comment on that possibly?
Yeah, I think if one has to be scrupulously follow the rules, then it's a new needle for every animal. But we know in a practical thing, if you've got, you go and vaccinate 500, store lambs, if you want to do that, then you're probably not going to do that. And I think if you discuss with the pharmaceutical companies, their advice was to have, just an alcohol cotton swab and, wipe the needle between the animal, so at least reduce the risk. But obviously, again, if you're in in an area where there's infection, a lot of infection, then you may want to be more strict. But I think discuss that with the vaccine companies and see what they advise.
Thank you. What about using these vaccines alongside other vaccines? Is there a problem when you're using, say, Toxovax and Enzovax, and then you put this vaccine in, or maybe you're doing Footvax, that kind of thing? It's an awful lot of vaccine.
Again, yeah. Sorry, Leanne, go on.
I was just going to say, none of these vaccines will have any concurrent usage claims, so we have to be really, really careful with that. We have to be really careful we're not overloading these animals with vaccine stimulants. Their little immune systems have got to respond to these vaccines. So yeah, I think that we're going to have to be really careful with that, and it's a big no-no to be doing these things on the same day within a week of each other, even if they haven't had a license claim.
And it's things like your Heptivax and Ovivax as well, isn't it? It's all sort of to consider.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And again, keep the records, and if you've got the bad luck and something goes wrong, to please report that, so that data comes out, that we know.
Yeah. Right, brilliant. It's been a really useful session. I found it absolutely riveting, and I think it's cleared a lot of stuff up, because we're all sort of gossiping up north about it all, and then just having this evening's really kind of set the story straight. So I just want to say a massive thank you to our panel tonight. I think it's been absolutely brilliant. Oh, hang on, I've got another question. Oh, somebody's saying thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I reiterate that. Thanks so much, everybody. Again, we'll be sending out those links. We'll send out a recording of tonight, so you can refer back to it if you've forgotten something. Again, if you think of something, tomorrow or tonight when you're sort of having a chat together, feel free to email us at the Farmer Network, or get in touch with me or Sarah. So yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for everybody to come. That's come tonight and taken the time up. So thank you.
Thank you for organising.
Thank you.
And for having us.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. No, thanks so much.
You're welcome, Carol.